Lesson 75, factoring trinomials in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. What we practiced factoring in the past was whenever we just had x squared plus bx plus c, where I had a coefficient of 1 in front of my x squared. Today, we're going to make things slightly more complicated by putting a coefficient other than 1 in front of that x squared, which is our a. So on example 1, it wants us to factor this one completely. And we're going to start this very similarly to how we started the other ones. We're going to start by opening up our parentheses. And instead of just splitting up x squared, I have to split up the 3 also. Well, 3 times what gets me 3? That's 3 times 1. So I'm going to say 3x here and x here, because when I distribute, 3x times x gets me 3x squared. I still want something that's going to multiply to get me a positive 12. And that will add to get me 13. But this part is going to be a little bit trickier, okay? So, things that multiply to get me 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Now, the trickier part here is that I have to have something that whenever I FOIL, I take my outside and my inside. Whenever I multiply those, I have to end up with a 13. Okay, so I'm going to start with these smaller numbers because 13 isn't very big. So if I put, let's say if I put a 3 here, that would give me 3x times 3 would give me 9x, and this would give me 4 times x, which is 4x. So if I put 3 here, they both have to be positive because this is positive, or they would both have to be negative, but since they're both positive, they're both going to be positive. So this is my factored answer, and I can check that by FOILing it out. So if I do 3x times x, that gets me 3x squared. Go ahead and draw that. 3x times 3 we said would get me 9x. 4x times x gets me 4x. And then 4 times 3 gets me 12. When I combine these middle terms, it's going to get me that 13x. Okay, so this is my final factored answer. Alright, we're going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to start by writing my parentheses, and there are a couple of different ways that we can split up this 4x squared, because things that multiply to get 4 are 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. I am going to start with the first one to see if we can find anything. If we can't, then we'll move on and do 2x and 2x. But for right now, we're going to say 4x and x, because when I FOIL, my first is going to get me 4x squared. I need something that will multiply to get this, and that whenever I FOIL, it will add to get me this. So things that multiply to get 15 are 1 and 15 and 3 and 5. Now, I need to get a positive here and a negative here. Well, for that to happen, both of these are going to have to be negative, because negative times a negative gives me a positive. Okay? And I have to add to get a negative, so they both have to be negative. So, I have 1 and 15 and 3 and 5. Well, if I put in 1 and 15, if I put the 1 here and the 15 here, okay, that would be 4x minus 15, x minus 1. When I go to my outside, that would get me negative 4x. My inside would get me negative 15x. This gets me negative 19x. That's not what I need, so that's not going to work. And if I switch them the other way, it's going to be way too big, because 4x times 15 would get me a negative 60, so too big. So let's try 3 and 5. So since I want to get 23, I know if I take 4 times 5, that would get me 20. And x times 3 would get me a 3. So let's see if this one works. This is going to get me 4x squared. Outside gets me negative 20x. Inside gets me a negative 3x. And last gets me a positive 15. If I take negative 20 minus 3, that gets me negative 23. So that is my answer. The quantity of 4x minus 3 times the quantity of x minus 5. On A, for example 3, we're going to be doing the same thing here. And with 6, again, there are a couple of different ways that we can split 6 up. It could be 1 times 6, or it could be 2 times 3. Alright, so we will start with 1 and 6. So 6x and x, and see if we can find anything that'll work. I have 8. So things that multiply to get 8 are 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. And I need to get a negative here, so one has to be positive, one has to be negative, and I have to end up with a positive 8. So if I use, let's see, if I use 1 and 8, and I have 6x and my x, and I know one has to be positive, one has to be negative, and I need to get a positive 8. So if I put the 1 over here and made it, we'll say make it a negative, make the 8 a positive, when I do this part, I'm going to have negative 6x, and this one's going to give me a positive 8, which gives 8x, which gives me 2x. That's not what I need. I need 8x. So this one isn't going to work, and if I switch them the other way, I'm going to get way too big of a number, so that's not going to work. Let's try 2 and 4. So we'll put my 6x back, my x, and if I take 6 times 4, that's going to be 24. That's too big. So let's put the 4 here and the 2 here, and we'll make this one a positive and this one a negative. So if I go here, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to go all the way over because I'm trying to find the middle term. So 6x times 2 is 12x, and here that gets me negative 4x. Well, that will get me an 8x. However, this part won't be completely factored. Okay, so since it's not completely factored, we would have to factor a 2 out, and that's not what it's wanting us to do. So let's try to do 2 and 3. So 2x and 3x. These numbers aren't going to change because we're still trying to get 8. And if I started with, we'll say the 1 and the 8 again, I would have 2x something and 3x something, and I want to get an 8 in the middle, so we will put the 8 at the end, because if we take 3 times 8, that would be too big. We'll put the 1 here, and we'll make this one the positive. Whoops, this one was the negative. Okay, so outside gets me 16x. Inside gets me negative 3. That gets me negative 3x. That gets me 13x. So that one doesn't work. So we're going to have to try 2 and 4. Well, since none of these have worked, 2 and 4 are going to have to work, right? So I need to make it so that when I multiply, I'm going to end up with an 8. So I know if I take 4 times 3, that'll get me 12. 2 times 4, or 2 times 2 will get me 4. So I want to be able to subtract the 4 from the 12 because I want the 8 to be positive. So let's check it. That gets me 6x squared. Outside would get me negative 4x. Inside gets me positive 12x. And last would get me a negative 8. When I take negative 4 plus 12x, that gets me a positive 8x. That is my final answer. Did it go? Oh wait, there's one more on this one. Okay, on B, once again, doing the exact same thing. This one will be a little easier because there's only one way to split up this 2x squared, and that's by taking 2x and x. Things that multiply to get 20 will be 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. Okay, and I need something that's going to end up with a negative 3 in the middle. So I'm going to start small, and I'm going to start with, let's see, if we go 4 times 5, we'll start with the smaller numbers because I'm trying to get a small number here, and I want it to end up being a negative 3. So I'm going to say negative 5 goes here and positive 4 goes here. Let's check and see if that will work. Whenever I take this one, I get negative 10x. This one, I get positive 4x. That does not get me a negative 3. That gets me a negative 7. So let's switch them around and try it the other way. 2x, and instead I'm going to put positive 5 and x minus 4. So if I check this one, the outside, I get a negative 8x plus 5x. That will get me the negative 3. Okay, so my final answer is 2x plus 5, and then times the quantity of x minus 4. Okay, when I check it, my first gets me 2x squared. Outside, we already checked that part, was negative 8x plus 5x, and then minus 20. That's it. Checks. Final answer. Okay, on this one, same thing here. We're going to start, we do have this y squared here, which is going to make things a little bit different, but we're going to start the same way. This 2x squared, there's only one way to split that up, and that's by putting 2x and x. I need something, because I have this y squared here, I know I'm going to have a y at the end of both of those, right? Because when I hit that last one, it's going to have to be y squared when I multiply. I need to multiply to get a 2. So things that multiply to get 2 are just 2 and 1. So it has to be 2 and 1. I need to get a positive here and a negative here, which means that both of these are going to have to be negative, because a negative times a negative gives me a positive. Okay? And to end up with a negative and a positive there, I have to have both negatives. Now it's just placing these in the right order. I need to get a 5. Okay? And I'm going to multiply here and here. So the only way for me to get a 5 from this is if I take 2 times 2 and 1 times 1 and put them together. So 2 times negative 2y is going to be negative 4xy, and negative 1y times x is negative 1xy, which gives me a negative 5xy, which is what I needed. So this part right here is my final answer. Last example here. This is similar to the practice that we had the other day. You cannot do this until you have it in the proper order. So we're going to write it as 14x squared plus 32x plus 8. Okay, so now I have it in standard form. Now I can do the factoring. 14 can be 1 and 14 or 2 and 7. I'm going to start with the 7 and 2. So I have 7x and 2x. See what we can figure out. I need to end up, I need to multiply to get 8. So that's 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. Those are my options. And I need a 32 in the middle. That's a pretty big number. So if I take, let's see, 7 times 8 would be way too big. So I'm not going to start with that one, because 7 times 8 is 56. That's too big. So let's try this one. 7 times 4 and 2 times 2. These are both positive, so these will both be positive. Let's check and see if this works. So outside, I would get 28x, plus the inside, I have 4x, which means that my answer would be 32x for the middle, and that's what I have. So this is, again, my final answer. Same thing here. We need to get it in standard form. So my 6x squared comes out first, minus 3x minus 9. Now, this one is not going to be a piece of cake, but I do want you to make an attempt to do it on your own. If you are having a hard time, I need to at least see in your notes that you tried. If it's not in your notes that you tried, then I am not going to give you credit for it, okay? I need to see that you're making an attempt. So try to do this one on your own. If you need help and you see me before a class, you're more than welcome to ask for help. So I hope that you've taken good notes, and I'll see you in class tomorrow. Have a good night.